do have Blackstorm Labs here represented, so the talk goes ahead. So what I'd like to do first of all is hand over for our first talk, which is about how the era of the standalone app is evolving and changing, and now we're very much into an era of social messenger apps and where that goes. So. For our first talk, The App is Dead, I'd like to introduce Michael Carter, who is the CEO and co-founder of Blackstorm Labs, who will be in conversation with Francis Kong, who's moderating, who's a games reporter from GBR. So thanks very much. Francis, over to you.
Thank you, David. So this is the talk of The App is Dead, how the post-app store increases social conversion. And as Dave said, with me on stage here is Michael Carter, CEO and founder of Blackstorm Labs, and my name is Francis Kong, one of the reporters for Game Business Review. So let's get started here. Michael, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks a lot. It's great to be here. It's some familiar faces and a lot of new faces too.
Awesome. Hope you're having a great conference here. Obviously, there's a lot of things that we want to ask you, but I just want to kind of overall broad question. What's your background in gaming, and how did you even get started in gaming in the first place?
So my background in gaming, I mean, I think it starts where a lot of people's background starts. You know, my earliest memories of playing games when I'm like 5 or something. I don't know how far back people remember, but for me, it's probably like 5 years old or something. And I really fell in love with computer games, particularly like a bunch that were written in QBasic. So they would run on like old DOS, and you could actually just look at the game and see the source code. And so you could actually, like for example, Bill Gates wrote a game called Donkey.bas, and it's just kind of this ridiculous game where you go back and forth on a street. But the cool part is you could look at the source code, you could actually change things, make it go a bit faster, or change how it rendered on the screen. And so that's when I really fell in love with not just playing games, but the idea that you could be more than just a participant, sort of a consumer of games. You could actually be a participant in creating games. And I think I've been sort of in the industry, at least as a hobbyist, ever since, from 6 years old on in some capacity.
Well, okay, that's pretty much how I think I got started in gaming as well too. Now, this talk today is about the App Store and the potential changes coming down the pipe right now, right? So most people here in the mobile industry, they basically access their games through apps. So if the app is potentially plateauing now, and we have a new frontier coming, how would people access these apps, these games, besides the App Store?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So first, I'd like to introduce briefly, Blackstorm Labs. We're a company that has 2 offices, one in Tokyo, one in Mountain View. We've got about 25 to 30 members. We've raised about $30 million to date. And we've actually gotten involved in what we call the post-App Store ecosystem, both in Japan specifically, but then also globally through Facebook. And so the kind of fundamental difference between how a lot of people currently look at the world in the games market and us is that most folks are building apps for the App Store. And we consider ourselves part of a new trend, which is the post-app store. And it's where you don't ever actually have a home screen icon. You don't actually put a game on the App Store. You instead put it inside of what we'd call a super app. And so it's sort of embedded inside of another app, which serves as the distribution channel.
Okay, so, wow, that's pretty cool. So basically, an app embedded inside a super app. So before I even go any further, just so we're all on the same page here, how do you define, or how does it define as what a super app actually is?
Yeah, so there's a lot of new things here. I'll just try to go through it really quick, but clearly, hopefully. So for a long time, the distribution channel that independent or large game publishers and developers have would be the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store. And these are 2 of the fastest growing mobile channels for publishing games. However, if you now look at something like a Facebook Messenger, for example, if you open it up, there are games inside of it. And so we have one of those games. It's a game called Everwing. And what's so interesting about Everwing is that it doesn't exist on the App Store at all. It actually is just discoverable only through Facebook Messenger. So it's something where in the traditional sense, the way a lot of people would measure like KPIs or metrics around a mobile gaming company, we don't adhere to any of those measurements, really. Like, how many installs did we have last month? Well, technically 0, right? But we still had a very successful month. And the reason is that we basically have to use a new type of technology, which is powered by HTML5. So it's a brand new set of tools to be able to create an experience that's fun and interactive and full screen, has great sound, audio and visuals, except it's sort of compacted down where it can load instantly from within another app. And so what it means then that Facebook has done is they've created a new game platform. It's a new distribution source where you can actually show up inside the chat interface as a game. You can go viral. People can spread the game around, and they do. It's a very, very viral game. And you can basically drive millions and millions of users worth of growth. And so the new relationship is that instead of us submitting to the App Store, we work with Facebook and publish there. And then in exchange for us bringing them serious engagement and kind of diversifying their users' experience, they give us access to whatever the last count is, 1.2 billion folks. So it's a very blue ocean, kind of very new world. And so we call Messenger then a super app because it's not just the app for what it was intended. It now serves as its own platform. And so it's sort of an app that became a platform, or more simply put, a super app. And so the simple definition of a super app would be any app that has hundreds of millions of monthly active users minimum. It serves some kind of core purpose on its own, like it's a messenger or it's a dating app or something like that. And it has access, or it allows access to third parties as a platform. And so there's a rise of super apps right now. WeChat is a super app. Facebook Messenger is a super app. And then there's probably 5 or 6 more on the horizon that are coming out with their own platforms.
That's actually really intriguing because now you're talking about how you're mobilizing an existing user base that's already been built by a previous app to grow a secondary function that's complementary to that primary function. That's awesome. So with this new type of technology, what advice do you have for potential developers to ready themselves for this new frontier then?
Well, so the ecosystem actually is completely different. It shares some overlap, like a lot of the same UI and kind of interaction for a player, like the immediate core game. A lot of what you already learned on mobile works because it's the same screen, the same device, the kind of same engagement. What's different is kind of the distribution and the game loop and kind of a lot of the metagame for how people play with each other. And the other thing that's different is the speed at which you scale up is shocking. I think we were shut off by our cloud providers for exceeding internal quotas, not even external quotas they told us about, but some internal quota that their own switches would hit, because we went from like 0 to millions of people in a matter of hours. And so the thing you have to understand now is that, I mean, we've already gotten probably $100 million worth of free marketing. If you look at the cost of an install, and you look at the number of people who've played our game, I mean, we basically had about $100 million of marketing budget spent on Everwing, but we didn't have to spend a dime. And that happened in a very compacted way. And so we went from 0 to a giant game, almost overnight. And if you think about like just the server capacity and the ability to scale up, like that's the first thing. It's not something that you put out and slowly gain, and it's only when you spend marketing dollars you grow. It's something that you put out and you grow instantly. It's almost like, it looks like a cliff. It goes like this and just straight up. And then the second thing, though, is that the context in which people are discovering the game is fundamentally different. They're not going to the App Store thinking, oh, I'd like to install something to kill time. They're actually in an active group with like 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 20 or 30 of their friends, and people are talking. They're all there talking to each other. It's very, very social. And to go from that talking context to seamlessly, with no friction, and instantaneously move into a gameplay context, it is a completely different mindset, because now you have players who are very social and they want to play the game together. And so the era of these kind of like single player games, that you go to the App Store and it's actually kind of a lonely experience, or even games where you play with strangers from around the world. I think of Supercell's games, for example, as really great online multiplayer games, but even those sorts of games don't cut it, because you actually need games that you play with your friends in these group chats. And it's not quite like it used to be on old Facebook on the desktop, because that wasn't a chatting environment. That was just kind of like a social feed. And so thinking about how you take that context and you turn it into a gameplay experience that engages, and retains and monetizes users, if you can figure that out, then the acquisition comes, for free.
That's actually really interesting, because what I'm hearing here is that instead of downloading a game and then hoping to gain engagement from other players, you already have engagement already installed, and then you choose the game based on the engagements already there, just like it's more organic. That's actually pretty cool. So now you've already done this with, obviously Everwing is one of your flagship products. How has Everwing, what have you learned from it, and how has it actually proven a lot of these models already in the wild market out there?
Yeah, so the first thing to note is that the onboarding experience of the game, because it's so frictionless, think about the funnel of discovering an App Store game, having to go to the App Store, download 100 megabytes, wait for it to finish, maybe turn on Wi-Fi, then kind of go to your home screen, turn it on. If it's a social game, you then have to connect it back to your social graph. I mean, there's many, many steps. And you compare that to the Everwing experience, it's like you tap, and then like the game starts and right away, and you're now playing the game. You never even switch app context, you're just right there. That can be amazing. It can also be a bit of a double-edged sword, because it means you have to instantly sort of engage people in the first like 3 seconds and give them something that feels fun and feels like they want to keep going a little bit farther. Usually if someone goes and downloads like a 200 megabyte game, they're going to at least give it 5 minutes of their time to figure out like what it's about, right? Whereas with an instant game, they're going to give it 15 seconds of their time. And so you have that moment to like really grab them. And so Everwing does that by making it so that right from the beginning, the moment you touch the screen, like the game is just live. It's just running the second it starts. And we found that if we make you jump through any hoops or any kind of tutorial, the drop-off of conversions starts to get pretty steep. And so it pops up, and then the game is live, just like that. And the second thing is we very quickly then get you, once we get you past that first 15 seconds, we have to get you into a tight game loop where you feel like you're progressing. And that tends to be like 30-second loops where you get through like 5 or 10 of these, where every time you go through, you get a little bit more powerful, you get a little bit farther, you get a little bit of a higher score, and it feels like you're really excelling and progressing and doing well. And then we have to, as soon as we get you through that, very quickly layer on top the context, where it's like, okay, I was just in a chat and then I like learned this strange game, but like, why did I get here? And it's like, oh, to play with my friends. And we then have to bring back the idea that you're in this environment with your friends, you're either competing against them or collaborating with them. And so I think that onboarding experience is very tricky to get right, and you got to really focus on the mindset and like the second-by-second engagement. And that's very, very different than an app. But fundamentally, the kind of technologies at your disposal, like the UIs and the kind of the level of immersion that you can provide is basically the same. I think sorry, go ahead. The next major thing then is, okay, say we have onboarded millions of users, and they are organized into these kind of pods, these active group chats where on average, I think it's about 6 people per chat, but there's actually a number of groups that are much larger, like 50 people or up. I mean, I think the Facebook cutoff is probably like 300. But you have all of your players, like you cannot play this game unless you're in a chat, right? So by definition, your players are all organized into these social pods. We then need features that take advantage of that. And it's actually really, really tricky to get it exactly right, because on the one hand, you want to allow people to play with each other. And so you think, oh, synchronous multiplayer. But the problem is then like everyone in that chat has to be there to make that work. And so then you say, oh, well, maybe we should do turn-based, like a game of checkers. I take a turn, then you take a turn. But those are fundamentally 2-player games. So you have a group chat of 20 people, and 18 just watch 2 people play checkers. Like, that's not going to work. So what we do is we say, okay, we're going to have a collaborative asynchronous experience where everybody in this group together is trying to achieve some big goal. And as everyone plays, it contributes their success to the group progress. And so we have this idea of boss raids, where we launched this just in March, actually. It's fairly new. But every single week, there's a progression of these really tough bosses. We're talking like these aren't the kind of bosses you grew up with. These are bosses that will kill you 300 times, before you manage to like do 10% of damage to them, right? And so it's fairly punishing, but you work as a group, so everybody can deal some damage, and then it shows back in the group kind of how far along you are, and then everybody earns treasure together. And what's so interesting about that then is that there's a certain amount of coordination and collaboration where you can jump in, you can play the game for 3 hours straight, or you can play the game for 3 minutes, and either way it kind of fits into this asynchronous mold where everybody's collaborating at the same time. And we found that has been incredible for engagement. In fact, the folks in our game play the game on average just under an hour a day. So it's a 55 minutes engagement per day. That's inside of Messenger, inside of Everwing. And so we've been able to nail that through, I think probably at least half to 2/3 of our engagement is that boss rate feature. And then the last thing is that, it's just, we got to take everything we learned. It's a brand new platform, right? But it's a brand new platform in the context of a decade of mobile gaming experience. So everything we learned about monetization, the whole game is built around like a gotcha mechanic where you're trying to basically buy chances at earning, collectible items that you then put together to create better collectible items. And so every single like rule or trick or playbook you've seen out of Japan, we've sort of like reincorporated that, put it into the game. And so together, we have a game that kind of fits the chat experience, but has all the standard like, retain, engage, monetize, acquire type hooks in the product that you'd expect.
That's genius, Michael. We're running out of time right now. It went really fast here, actually. But before we finish up, is there any parting words of wisdom that you want to give anyone out there, either in business development, media, that are looking at this HTML new technology, this new frontier of going beyond just the App Store?
Yeah, so, it's kind of funny. I have a company that is leading in this space, right? And so probably what I should do is not be here on stage and telling you guys how great it is. I should just go and like take over that whole space. But the truth is that the market is immense. It's much bigger than any other market out there that you can possibly imagine, because on one super app alone, you have more than 1 billion active users that nobody is competing with you for, and you can acquire virally and for free. And that's one single super app. And from what we've been seeing, and just like if you just read the news and like what people are looking at and what other apps are trying, like if you look at the fact that Line Messenger launched an HTML5 game, you've got Kik and Tango, you've got WeChat, and then you think sort of what could Uber do, what could Tinder do, and you look at all of these apps. Very soon we'll be in a world where there are half a dozen super apps, each with 1 billion folks in the app. And if you get into that space, the ability, like we are one of the largest games right now, in the world, and definitely one of the fastest growing, if not the fastest growing. And we're completely under the radar. And the whole market will be these super apps fairly soon. And so what I would say is that it makes a lot of sense to help grow this ecosystem together. I think what we're looking for is to see more mature developers investing in the space. We're in a position to kind of help with that as either a publisher or a technical platform. And we're trying to take a very collaborative approach, because it's so big that, we're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars of value over the next few years. There's no way a single company could sort of monopolize it. So what I would say is just go take a good hard look at what's out there and kind of what's working and how it's working. And then if you're interested in talking, feel free to come chat, or just go launch a game in HTML5.
Thank you so much, Michael, and thank you everyone here for joining us with the Post App Store talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you.